Good morning, everybody. I'm Jane Monreal. Thanks for joining us here at 9 o'clock on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. If you've downloaded WCNC Plus to your Roku or Fire TV, we appreciate for you for the recent download. Hopefully you tell your friends and your family because this is how we run the news live here on the stream from the studio into the Live Impact studio, just kind of raw and real as it happens in real time. couple of things going on this morning. We are standing by for a live press conference. Speaking of raw and unfiltered, this is the White House right now as we're taking a look, awaiting a White House press briefing. Now, we do know that President Trump is set to speak today with Vladimir Putin on the war in Ukraine, as well as an announcement over the weekend that President Biden was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, group or grade 5 prostate cancer. Now, whether they will address one or both of those subject matters, that's yet to be determined, to be announced. We have no advance warning or say on what they will be talking about at the White House, but they usually don't hold press conferences this early on a Monday morning, 9 o'clock. So as we await that, we do want to like I mentioned, tell you that President Biden has posted on his social media about his cancer diagnosis. This is what he said over the weekend. Cancer touches us all. Like so many of you, Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Thank you for lifting us up with love. Also, President Trump did post on Truth Social this post. Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest wishes and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery. President Obama also posted on X, Michelle and I are thinking of the entire Biden family. Nobody has done more to find breakthrough diagnosis. And then, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris posting about her sentiment. Doug and I saddened to learn of President Biden's diagnosis. So as we bring you back out here live again, like I said, we are still waiting to hear about President Trump's press conference. He is set to hold a phone call with Vladimir Putin as well as Volodymyr Zelensky on the war in Ukraine. In the meantime, Alice Barr's in Washington with the very latest.
This morning, an outpouring of support for former President Biden after the announcement he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that spread to his bones.
Once the cancer has spread to the bones, it's no longer curable, but it's very treatable and very controllable.
The former president's personal office noting the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, making it more likely to respond to treatment, and saying he was diagnosed on Friday after increasing urinary symptoms.
Testosterone fuels this. It is the food for this type of tumor. So if they can cut out the testosterone, they're more likely to starve the tumor.
As president and vice president, Mr. Biden spearheaded a cancer moonshot initiative aimed at improving treatment and prevention, speaking frequently on the topic after losing his son Beau to brain cancer in 2015.
It's fair to say one of the most devastating words anyone can hear, and it's not hyperbole, is cancer.
President Trump writing that he and the First Lady are saddened to hear about the diagnosis and wish Joe a fast and successful recovery. Former President Obama writing, nobody has done more to find breakthrough treatments for cancer in all its forms than Joe. Former Vice President Kamala Harris saying Joe is a fighter who will face this challenge with strength, resilience, and optimism. A source familiar with the Bidens' thinking telling NBC News the former president and family are meeting with doctors and considering multiple treatment options, including hormone treatment. Where he'll be treated, not yet clear, though the support behind him is. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
All right, as we come back out here now live on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, again, awaiting a live press conference from the White House. We're going to bring that to you as it comes in. At the moment, it comes in here to the newsroom on WCNC Plus. In the meantime, the other big story over the weekend, terrible weather in the Midwest, especially hitting St. Louis, a tornado hitting St. Louis, Missouri. These are some of the pictures and video of the aftermath of these deadly tornadoes hitting the St. Louis area. You can see all of the debris. I mean, these are strong structures with old bricks and just leveled out there as we take a look now. Just rows and rows of homes of terrible damage with all of that wood debris just piled up. You can see that it is going to be a long time. Unimaginable how long it's going to take for folks to clean this up. Our Walker Lawson's actually in St. Louis today helping their team cover some of the aftermath. Let's go to his story now, covering the latest of the deadly Midwest tornadoes here on Live Impact News on WCNC+.
There is widespread debris across this area. Even though we've had the entire weekend here to clean up, debris remains everywhere. Now, again, when this tornado tore through, we are pretty much in downtown St. Louis, just a couple miles away from the center city. So again, this is a highly populated area. You have a lot of tall buildings like this one behind me. This is actually a nursing facility where all the residents had to be evacuated shortly after. Inside, we have doors and windows that popped and broke due to the pressure of this tornado. As we pan over a little bit more to this building beside us, you can see the roof is completely gone on it. Many roofs gone, and a lot of homes have been torn down completely, coming down to rubble from this wind, of course, from this tornado. But again, today we are actually continuing to see the impacts. You can probably hear the wind in my microphone just a little bit now. We're starting to see daylight here in this area, but the biggest issue is there's debris across the ground. As you can see, there's tree limbs. There are parts of roofs hanging off, and the concern today is we're actually under a weather impact alert day here in St. Louis because we have the risk of winds up to 50 to 75 miles per hour again today and tomorrow. The possibility of hail. There's a possibility of isolated tornadoes again and some heavy rain in this region. So an area that is trying to clean up, that's again facing challenges again. But earlier we did speak to the administrator yesterday, actually, here at this nursing facility, who spoke a little bit about the damage and the cleanup that they're trying to get these residents back. We also heard from employees who say they just want to get these people back in their homes here.
Because this is our community and this is like our home too, and we love our residents. I love my job, so we want to get it back up and running and get the residents back home safely and get the building back together so they can get back on schedule. Like, it's time for us to get back to work, and we just been cleaning up, trying to get the glass and the debris and all the aftermath, just trying to straighten it back up so we can come back home.
Now, again, as she said, they're just trying to get these residents back home. Again, some of these people have been out here all night long. A lot of the employees have slept here the last couple nights just to make sure no one can get into the building again, because all of this street is without power. There are all these lights don't have power. All the buildings are without power. So they've been staying here just to make sure no one gets in, and again, to try to clean up as much as they can. Again, they've had to put tarps up as well because we are anticipating more rain today.
And that was our Walker Lawson giving you the latest there from St. Louis. Just awful damage and destruction for that large Midwest city. We do have Samaritan's Purse out there. Of course, they're the nonprofit that reaches out after disasters and things of that nature, out of Billy Graham down the street here from WCNC Charlotte. And we do have our Ben Thompson and Kaylin Hagwood. They spoke to organizers from Samaritan's Purse, helping those storm victims. Let's run that interview for you now as we await a press conference from the White House. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC.
Live from Kentucky is Jacob Brutz. He's a project manager with Samaritan's Purse. Jacob, I am sure you have your hands full. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Can you just describe for us some of the damage that you're seeing there?
Absolutely. So I actually came in from the south, from Tennessee, and right on the highway, as soon as we got to London, Kentucky, you could see the damage just right off the highway, both left and right. Probably 400 homes that you could immediately see were just completely destroyed. Contents strewn about the rolling hills. You had trees snapped over. Roofs were picked up and carried 200, 300 yards away and set down in the middle of fields. It was just absolutely devastating to the town of London, to just southern Kentucky in general. And I know St. Louis saw a lot of damage as well. It's really just overwhelming to these communities around here.
And what kind of support has your organization been providing since you guys arrived?
We actually just sent out our first work teams today. We were getting ready Saturday and Sunday, and we have about 45 individuals out this morning working on roof tarping. There's a lot of content recovery. We have individuals and volunteers going through these homes, just trying to find the personal items of these homeowners, these individuals who have really just lost everything. Many are overwhelmed and don't even know where to begin, so we're able to come alongside them, just emotionally support them, walk them through the process of looking through for these items, trying to get a tarp back on their roof, trying to clear up their yard, get trees out of the way so they can move back in. It's really just the first step in a long process of being able to move on from this disaster.
And I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but there are storms in the forecast this week. How does that impact your team and the people you're helping? Because safety's got to be number one.
All right, it looks like that press conference from the White House has started. Let's go right now live to Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, here on Live Impact News on WCNC+.
Forward to signing that bill into law later this afternoon, and we will see you all there. In other news, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed the House Budget Committee last night, bringing it one step closer to final passage. The One Big Beautiful Bill is perfectly named because it represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver on the Make America Great Again agenda responsible for President Trump's landslide victory on November 5th. The America First policies in this bill are the reason why Republicans currently have the majority in Congress right now. Passing this bill is what voters sent Republicans to Washington to accomplish. And that's why it's essential that every Republican in the House and the Senate unites behind President Trump and passes this popular and essential legislative package. This bill will be the single most pro-small business, pro-family, and pro-American worker legislation ever. This bill will give Americans the largest tax cuts in our nation's history. When Republicans pass the bill, Americans will be keeping more of their hard-earned money and taking home much bigger paychecks. The One Big Beautiful Bill will deliver some of President Trump's central campaign promises. No tax on tips for our hardworking waiters, waitresses, and service workers. No tax on overtime for our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and all those Americans who are putting in extra hours to make ends meet. And a large tax deduction on interest payments for Americans who purchase American-made cars. Despite desperate Democrat lies, the biggest beneficiary of this tax cut will be working-class Americans and their families. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 per year will pay about 15% less in taxes after this legislation is passed. And according to a brand new paper from the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the average family with 2 children's take-home pay will be up to $13,000 higher because of the increase in wages and reductions in tax obligations. The CEA study also said that the average overtime worker receives a tax cut of roughly $2,000. Again, this is great news for our nurses, our police officers, and all those who work overtime to make ends meet across our country. Put simply, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill will be a boon for working-class America. This One Big Beautiful Bill is also pro-family. It will increase the child tax credit to $2,500 per child, establish optional savings account for newborn babies with a $1,000 credit added, and strengthen paid family leave. This bill also delivers historic tax relief to America's seniors by allowing middle and low-income Social Security recipients to deduct an additional $4,000 in payments from their taxable income. If Democrats get their way and the Trump tax cuts are not extended, Americans will face the largest tax hike in history to the tune of $4 trillion. Republicans must not side with Democrats in helping them raise taxes. The One Big Beautiful Bill also provides critical protections of Medicaid, which will strengthen and preserve the program for decades to come through common sense efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. Medicaid will no longer be used to pay for barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children. And the 1.4 million illegal aliens who are currently improperly receiving Medicaid benefits will be kicked off the program to preserve it for hardworking American citizens who need it. President Trump and Republicans are protecting Medicaid benefits for pregnant women, children, disabled individuals, low-income seniors and families, and the most vulnerable Americans in our society. And that's what Democrats are so angry about. Basic Medicaid protections that will stop the funding of transgender insanity and illegal aliens from ripping off American taxpayers. As you all know, over his first 4 months in office, President Trump ended the previous administration's open border crisis and secured our homeland in record time, all using executive authority. Now Congress needs to act. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the most significant investment in our nation's border patrol and law enforcement agents in our nation's history. The bill ensures that President Trump's popular and successful border security measures are made permanent. Republicans have the backs of Border Patrol and ICE agents who were put through hell over the past 4 years and have quickly worked to secure our southern border. And that's why this bill gives them more resources to do their jobs, including a $10,000 much-needed bonus to ICE agents and Border Patrol agents over the next 4 years. To provide those brave agents with desperately needed reinforcements on the ground, the bill allows for the hiring of thousands of new ICE personnel, customs officers, and Border Patrol agents. These significant hirings will empower President Trump to continue delivering on his promise to carry out the largest mass deportation in the history of our country. Again, that is a promise that Republicans made to American voters. It's a promise they were elected on, and it's a promise Republicans on Capitol Hill need to keep: secure our border. To supplement those efforts, the bill's funds will fund the completion of President Trump's signature border wall. As a result, 701 miles of primary wall, 900 miles of river barriers, 629 miles of secondary barriers, pedestrian barriers will be constructed when this bill passes, along with cutting-edge technology to secure our homeland from dangerous illegal alien invaders. This bill also advances our national security and defense interests by ensuring the United States military has the necessary resources to remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. The bill will provide resources for the construction of President Trump's Golden Dome to safeguard Americans from potential attacks, give the Coast Guard resources to build more modernized ships, and the Air Force resources to acquire better planes. If all of those incredible things were not enough, the Big Beautiful Bill also finally modernizes air traffic control in America, a bipartisan issue. The bill will allow President Trump to deliver on his promise to overhaul and update our air traffic control systems to keep Americans flying as safe and efficiently as possible. The previous administration failed to act and do this themselves, despite repeated warnings from the GAO, which has resulted in unacceptable delays at major airports like Newark that the Trump administration is working hard to address. When the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, we will replace the current antiquated system, the FAA will enhance safety in our skies, reduce delays, and power the future of air travel in the United States. That's just some of what this historic legislation will accomplish. It is absolutely essential that Republicans unite behind the One Big Beautiful Bill and deliver on President Trump's agenda. There is no time to waste. Americans gave Republicans a once-in-a-generation opportunity to course-correct our country over many wrongs over the past 4 years. And Americans are counting on Republicans to work as hard as President Trump is in this White House every day on Capitol Hill. Send this legislation to his desk as soon as possible for his signature. Here in our new media seat today, we have Liam Cosgrove, the White House correspondent for Zero Hedge. With that, Liam, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. So, first question is on foreign policy.
Sure.
The president has made several moves towards peace in multiple fronts. India, Pakistan with the Houthis, talking with Iran and talking with Putin. Biden didn't even talk to Putin for the entire span of the war, which is crazy considering two nuclear powers were engaged in a proxy war. So I do admire these moves by the current president, I'll be honest. However, as of today, we are still funding both Israel's and Ukraine's wars. So can Americans expect to finally be done financing foreign wars at some point? Do you consider that one of the president's goals?
Well, I think I can summarize the president's foreign policy agenda with 2 words: America first. And that means putting the American people and the American taxpayer first. And that's why the president is moving as quickly as he possibly can and working overtime to end these conflicts in both Israel and in Gaza, and also the Russia-Ukraine war. As you all know, the president will be speaking with Putin at 10 o'clock. He plans to call President Zelensky when that call concludes. I spoke to the president about that call at 10 o'clock. I don't want to get ahead of those very important conversations, but of course you will hear directly from the president or me after those calls conclude today, so you can expect that. As for Israel and Gaza, the president continues to not only himself but his national security team engage in talks on both sides of this conflict. The president made it very clear to Hamas that he wanted to see all hostages released, and last week when we were flying out of town, there was great news on that front with the return of Eden Alexander, who is the last remaining hostage in Gaza. So to answer your question, the president is always thinking about the American people, the American taxpayer first. He wants these conflicts to end, not just to save money, but most importantly to save lives.
Thank you. And my only other question for you is, so over the weekend, President Trump posted Truth Social a video highlighting what most people call the Clinton body count, which is the strange number of suicides that seem to happen in Clinton circles. I have a headline here from the Washington Post that said, Trump peddles false conspiracy theories tying the Clintons to several deaths. So I just wanted to highlight real quick, this wasn't in Trump's video, but this is from the Arkansas Times, and it's the death of Mark Middleton, who was a former Clinton White House aide, who was found dead on a Clinton Foundation property. And I'll just quote from the Arkansas Times. Middleton apparently shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and also hung himself from a tree with an extension cord. So I have no idea how somebody commits suicide that way, but if the Washington Post is here, maybe you can enlighten us as to how that was actually a suicide. So anyways, that's just a lead into my question about the most famous Clinton-related suicide, which is that of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still a lot of questions around that case. You've released phase 1 of the Epstein files. What was missing from that is any connection to his ties to intelligence agencies, and that's really the whole story, that not just trafficking young girls, but doing it on behalf of intelligence agencies, and even potentially as part of a blackmail ring with potential ties to the Israeli government. So for phase 2, when can we expect it? Will it have information pertaining to those aspects of the Epstein case?
I know the Attorney General has committed to releasing those files. I would defer you to the Department of Justice on her timeline, but when she has made a promise in the past, she has kept it, and I'm certain that she will in this case as well. Rachel.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president set a 2-week deadline for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate a deal. That time is now up. Does the president intend to set a new deadline on this call with President Putin, and how much longer is he willing to give these talks?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the specifics of the conversation the president will be having with President Putin in less than an hour this morning, but he has made clear throughout the entirety of this conflict, since he inherited it from Joe Biden. Don't forget, this is a war that began because of the previous administration's incompetence and weakness, and President Trump is working very hard to fix it. He has made it clear to both sides that he wants to see a peaceful resolution and a ceasefire as soon as possible, but as for specifics on a timeline, I won't get ahead of the president.
And just on the goals for this call in particular, is the goal to get Putin to agree to a ceasefire? Is the goal to lead to some sort of in-person negotiations with Putin and the president?
Well, I think, again, we'll see how the call goes, and the president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end, and he's grown weary and frustrated with both sides of the conflict. The president and his team have put an enormous amount of effort in solving this very complicated war that, again, began because of the last administration's weakness.
Does he still want to meet Putin personally?
I think the president would certainly be open to that, but let's see how this call goes today.
What's the status of the secondary sanctions package? The president's been talking about that. You haven't imposed them yet, but is that still on the table?
I think everything's on the table, yes, and again, I won't get ahead of the president in any commitments or decisions, but certainly it's something he's been looking at and discussing. Elaine.
Hi, Ken. I want to ask you about the House budget bill. So does the president agree with Republicans behind this bill that Medicaid work requirements should be implemented as soon as 2026?
So the president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society: pregnant women, low-income families, seniors, those who truly need these benefits. And it should be going to people who physically cannot work. We want to see able-bodied Americans, at least working 20 hours per week, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's even looking for work or volunteering for 20 hours a week if they are receiving Medicaid. These are common sense provisions. These are common sense changes that were actually introduced by former Democrat President Clinton. They've been supported by every Democrat president since, including the previous president, Joe Biden. But again, these are common sense reforms to ensure that those that this program was intended for receive those benefits.
And then just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
Thanks.
Edward.
Yes, thanks.
And then I'll go to you.
Thanks,
You're
guys.
welcome.
I want to get the president's reaction to Moody's downgrading the credit rating of the United States.
Sure. Well, look, the president talked about this over the weekend. The Secretary of Treasury also talked about it. When you look at the world has confidence in the United States of America and our economy once again. The president just last week secured trillions of dollars in investments from countries in the Middle East. We have seen trillions of dollars of investments flowing into our economy since the president took office. That is because America or people around the world have confidence in the United States of America. And if you also just look at the raw economic data that we're seeing, last week when we were out of town, inflation dropped once again. Oil prices are dropping, gas prices are dropping. The president has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the American economy already. So there's a lot of optimism in this economy, and the president disagrees with that assessment.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I could. On your Middle East trip, the United Arab Emirates is getting some of the most advanced AI chips, so there's agreements there. The UAE is the newest member of BRICS. Is there a concern from the president that those chips and the technology will pass through to China, India, Russia, and Iran?
Part of going to the Middle East was to ensure that the United States, that this part of the region, our Gulf partners, know that the United States of America is there for them again, and that they should be investing in the United States, not in China. And these AI agreements, particularly the one the Secretary of Commerce signed in the UAE, has security guarantees to ensure that China is not getting the advantage, but the United States is getting the advantage when it comes to AI, and that the UAE and the U.S. are working hand in hand together to invest in this space. So you read the agreements, there are security guarantees, and this was a great trip for the country, no doubt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said today that Israel will take control of all of Gaza. Is that a goal that President Trump is comfortable with or that he supports?
I'll have to talk to the president about those comments as they just came, I believe, from the prime minister this morning, and I'll let him speak on that. The president has made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. He wants all hostages to be released. He was pleased that Eden Alexander was returned home safely to his loving family. The president spoke with Eden directly while we were traveling to the Middle East last week. As for the prime minister's comments, I'll let the president himself respond to those. Sure.
Two questions. One, how involved does the president intend to be directly in talking to House members about the bill over the next couple of weeks or the next week?
Sure. Well, over the weekend, the president was in direct conversation and communication with the Speaker of the House. He's been very involved. He always is. He's willing to pick up the phone when he is asked to. So he'll continue to be very engaged in this process with both House members and his friends on the Senate side as well.
And on former President Biden's cancer diagnosis, the president put out a very nice message on Truth Social to President Biden directly. Does he intend to call? What does he intend to say directly?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe they have spoken, but I'm sure the president would be open to doing that. I spoke to him last night about the former president's cancer diagnosis, and the statement that he put out was the initial reaction he had with me on the phone as well. Peter.
Follow up on former President Biden. White House doctors may have missed the early stages of his prostate cancer. So Is President Trump worried about the quality of care that presidents get here?
Not as far as President Trump is concerned. The White House physician we have here is phenomenal, and the team of physicians that take care of the president, particularly at Walter Reed Medical Center, are great. The president had his physical recently, as you know. He had perfect results. He's in very good shape. I think those of you who traveled to the Middle East with us last week can attest to the president's endurance. And by the way, I will add, we returned home from a very long and tiring trip last week, and on Saturday, where was the president? In the Oval Office working all day. He doesn't stop, he doesn't quit, he's in great health, and he trusts his physicians.
Two more things. Putin ghosted everybody at these peace talks last week. As President Trump phones him today to try to figure out an end to the Ukraine war, does he think that Putin is the good guy or the bad guy?
I'll let the president speak on that conversation later. He's made his feelings about both sides of this war quite clear throughout it. He wants to see it end.
And
Annie,
the last one, what does President Trump mean when he says that Taylor Swift is no longer hot?
Look, he is speaking about Taylor Swift's political views and how perhaps it has impacted the support of the American public for her work, and I will leave it at that. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I'm just going back one more time to the White House Medical Office, because there seems to be some question about this with regard to President Biden's screening. Can you say whether or not President Trump is screened for prostate cancer as part of his physical?
To the best of my understanding, he is, but we can certainly check in with the White House physician and go back and look at that physical report.
And then just one other question. Recently, Stephen Miller at the White House made some comments about considering suspending habeas corpus. And I'm curious if there's any update on how the White House is exploring that option to enact the president's agenda.
I don't have any update at this time, but I can check in with our Deputy Chief of Staff. Mary Margaret, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Given the ongoing revelations about the former president's mental acuity and how staff and media covered that up, especially with the release of this book, 2 days, I think, is there any interest in further scrutiny of Kevin O'Connor, the former president's physician?
I'll let the president speak on that. I spoke to the president again about the former president's health diagnosis last night, and he wanted to extend his warmest wishes to the former president and his family. But as for any further action, I'll let the president speak on that first. Michelle.
Vice President Vance's meeting with Zelensky. Can you share any more information on that?
My understanding was it was a good meeting, a productive meeting, and we're grateful that the Vice President did it and that he also went to the Pope's first Mass in Rome. I also have an update on that. The Vice President passed along a letter to the Pope from the President and from the First Lady extending their warm wishes and inviting them to the White House as soon as they possibly can come. Michelle.
On Iran, Steve Witkoff said yesterday that continued enrichment is a red line for the U.S. The Iranian foreign minister says that's going to continue no matter what. How committed is the U.S. to that red line, and what's the next step for the next round of talks?
We are 100% committed to that red line. The President, Special Envoy Witkoff, Secretary Rubio have made that incredibly clear, not just to the American public, but also in those discussions that Special Envoy Witkoff has had directly with the Iranians.
And the next round of talks?
I don't have an update for you, but we can get one. To the back row. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. South Africa's president says he's going to come to the White House to meet with President Trump on Wednesday. What are the president's expectations for that trip? And South Africa's president recently said he believes the folks that have been resettled here recently are cowards running away from problems in South Africa. Does the White House have a response to that?
So I did see the South African president put out that statement. I want to confirm on our end with our Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and we'll get back to you on that. Monica.
Thanks, Caroline. You mentioned the President and the First Lady are signing the historic Take It Down Act this afternoon. I'm curious to know, what are some of the repercussions or consequences for these online platforms or perpetrators that won't comply with the act?
Well, what this bill does, it takes the initial step to ensure that prosecutors are able to take down, that's why it's called the Take It Down Act, platforms that are allowing this sexually explicit content on their platform. So it gives them more leeway to go after them as they see fit. But as for specific repercussions, I would defer you to the Department of Justice of how they plan to implement this bill once it is signed later today. Brian.
Yes, thank you. You said in your opening statement you talked about this MAGA baby savings account. Exactly how would that work? Who would be eligible for it? I'm assuming women would be eligible for that.
Yes, so one of the provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill, as I said, this is a very pro-family piece of legislation. Not only does it increase the child tax credit, but it also includes MAGA baby savings accounts for children that are born before January 1st, 2024, under 8 years old, U.S. citizens, and have at least one parent with a valid Social Security number. And when this tax provision becomes law, the child, if the parents seek to do this, will be set up with a savings account. Essentially, it's a 401k for a newborn baby. And child's relatives, their parents, can contribute up to $5,000 per year of after-tax dollars annually to that account. And then later in the baby's life, at age 25, savings account holders can withdraw up to the full balance of the account. Upon reaching 30, the account holders can access the full balance of the account for any purpose desired. So it's a great initiative for new parents, new mothers who want to set up this savings account for their children. Ouija.
Thank you, Caroline. President Trump and his top economic aides have repeatedly said that Americans will not pay the cost of tariffs. In fact, last week, Lutnick said people have to drop the, quote, silly arguments that consumers would pay the cost. But over the weekend, as you know, the president posted that Walmart should eat the tariffs and not charge the value customer anything. I'll be watching, and so will your customers. So does he acknowledge that if companies don't absorb the full cost, Americans will have to pay?
Well, first of all, the CEO of Walmart made those comments about the tariffs on an earnings call where CEOs, I believe, are legally obligated to give the most dire warnings and forecasts to their investors and stakeholders. The reality is, as the president has always maintained, Chinese producers will be absorbing the cost of these tariffs. And that is why China was so quick to hustle to the negotiating table with the United States of America. They need our markets, they need our consumers, and I would again point you to the inflation report that came out last week showing that inflation is declining in large part because energy prices are dropping across the board in this country because of the president's robust energy agenda that he has taken since January 20th. So the president is committed to ensuring that prices remain low for American consumers, and he maintains the position that foreign countries will absorb these tariffs.
What does he mean by "I'll be watching" to Walmart?
He'll be watching, seeing what they're doing. Jennifer.
On the gift plane from Qatar, 3 things. Is there a timeline for the U.S. receiving that plane? Do you know how long it will take to retrofit the plane to presidential standards? And thirdly, has the intelligence community, security folks, have they weighed in on whether that plane can actually be secured to presidential standards?
I'm glad you brought up this question because I was watching the American press spew a lot of misinformation about the plane donation last week when we were abroad. Let's be very clear. The government of Qatar, the Qatari family, has offered to donate this plane to the United States Air Force, where that donation will be accepted according to all legal and ethical obligations. It will be retrofitted to the highest of standards by the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force. This plane is not a personal donation or a gift to the President of the United States. And everyone who wrote that last week should go and correct their stories because this is a donation to our country and to the United States Air Force. As for a timeline, because it is the United States Air Force that is accepting the plane, I would defer you to them for specifics because the president, frankly, has nothing to do with it. It's the Air Force's project to take on. Sure. Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Caroline. Did the president call fiscal conservatives who were hesitant to vote for the Big Beautiful Bill? And if so, what did they say? What did he say?
I don't reveal the president's private discussions unless he gives me the liberty to, but he has been engaged in this process. He spoke to the Speaker of the House, and he will continue to make those phone calls if it's necessary for him. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
I'll go to both of you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Any updates on Greenland? Will the president be making any trips, and do we have any details you can share with us?
I don't have any future foreign trips to read out for you. We just returned home from one. But the president maintains the reasoning for Greenland's strategic purposes in the Arctic, and he continues to remain committed to the idea of obtaining Greenland in whatever means we can to advance our national security interests in the region. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a question. Was Lebanon part of the discussions during the Middle East tour, and did you meet with any Lebanese representatives?
To my knowledge, the president did not meet with any representatives from Lebanon, although he did talk about the election that they recently had there and how he hopes that Lebanon can come to a more peaceful place in their country and that we drive out Hezbollah, Iranian-backed Hezbollah proxies in Lebanon to ensure peace and prosperity in that country and also for the greater Middle Eastern region. And I would just add to that before I wrap up, because the president's call will begin in a few minutes. The president's historic tour to the Middle East last week truly reset our foreign policy agenda in that region. I think actually, in fact, the Washington Post had a headline, President Trump remakes U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and that's absolutely true. He took a courageous and bold step to lift sanctions on Syria. He strengthened our ties with our Gulf partners, and he put Iran into a very difficult position because the United States of America is back. And I will summarize the president's trip. An anecdote that I heard directly from a member of one of the foreign delegations. I asked him how hopeful their country was when they learned President Trump won the election. And he told me when President Trump won the election, it was like the lights turned on in a dark room. For the past 4 years to the rest of the world, America was dark. We were unresponsive. We did not pick up the phone. We did not return calls. All of that has changed under the leadership of this president, and I think the world saw that last week with this historic and wildly successful trip, and the work continues. The president will be speaking to President Putin at 10 a.m., and we'll have a readout for you after that call, and we'll see you in the Rose Garden at 3 o'clock. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline.
And it looks like the press conference ending there from the White House after Press Secretary answered a number of questions from a very large press pool, standing room only. No real update on President Trump's diagnosis for his cancer announcement, prostate cancer announcement. Only just the social posts that we saw from President Trump, as well as well wishes from President Trump. Most of the questioning in the way of their trip after arriving back from the Mideast, and of course the reconciliation bill, that one big beautiful bill which failed to pass a key vote last week. So pushing for lawmakers to get it on President Trump's desk to move forward. Right now, I want to take you out to Dedham, Massachusetts as we enter week 5 in the Karen Reed retrial. There is a new witness on the testimony on the stand right now. Let's listen in here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
For the court.
Carl Miyasako, Miyasako.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a senior DNA analyst at a forensic laboratory called Bodie Technology.
And where is Bodie Technologies located?
Lorton, Virginia.
And where did you go to school?
Virginia Commonwealth University.
And what degrees did you receive there?
I have a bachelor's of science in forensic science.
Now, following your education, where did you go to work?
Bodie Technology.
And how long have you worked there?
I've been employed at that laboratory for over 11 years.
And when you joined Bodie Technologies, what was your position and title that you were initially hired for?
Initially, I started off as a DNA technician.
And when did you become an analyst?
After a few years at the laboratory, I became a DNA analyst.
What is the difference at Bodie Lab between a technician and an analyst?
Technician mainly does laboratory work, and an analyst is allowed to analyze data and write reports.
Now, could you please describe for the jury the training that you underwent initially as a technician?
So I observed people perform all the tasks that I was training in, and then I'm supervised performing tasks by a qualified individual, and then I do competency tests where I'm performing things independently.
Now, is there a continuing educational component of Bodie?
Yes.
And could you please describe for the jury what that entails?
So continuing education just allows analysts or technicians to keep up to date with current topics within the community and future advancements in technologies.
Now, could you please describe for the jury what type of lab Bodie is?
Bodie is a private accredited forensic laboratory.
And where do your cases come from?
Our cases come from different agencies throughout the country, so law enforcement agencies, medical examiners, other laboratories as well.
Basis, national basis, or something else?
National basis.
And what is the difference at Bodie Lab or Bodie Technologies between a DNA Analyst 1 and a DNA Analyst 2?
The type of caseload and different cases being assigned to these individuals.
Now, what is your current role at Bodie Labs?
My current role is a senior DNA analyst.
And what is a senior DNA analyst, and what do you do in that role?
So senior analyst provides expertise or leadership in at least one discipline within the company. Senior analysts report challenging cases, are independent of other analysts, and also train other analysts as well.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up, please.
And sir, that microphone in front of you is adjustable. You can put it as close to yourself as you feel comfortable with. Thank you, Your Honor. Now, specifically with reference to DNA analysis, can you explain to the jury first in general terms how that analysis is performed at your lab?
Yeah, so it starts with receipt of evidence, and then it goes through the laboratory through different procedures up until we develop that DNA profile, and it gets interpreted and analyzed.
Now, is the Bodie Lab accredited?
Yes.
And by whom is it accredited?
We are accredited by a NSI National Accreditation Board.
Now, are there steps taken within your lab at Bodie to prevent against contamination?
Yeah, we have protocols to monitor contamination and to also prevent contamination.
Now, also at the lab, is there a review process, and can you sort of describe your role as it applies as a senior DNA analyst to that review process?
Yeah, so all cases go through a review process. So after, let's say, the reporting analyst completes a case, it goes into submission for a technical review. During that review process, the entire case file is looked over. So it's looked over to see if everything was done per protocol, if it's something that I or anyone else in the lab would have done, if any necessary reprocessing steps were taken. Data is reviewed. If there was comparisons, that's something that a reviewing analyst would also do and see if they come to the same conclusions as the other analysts.
Now, just again, in general terms, can you explain to the jury just a little bit more in detail as far as the protocols that a technical review is concerned with, and sort of how a technical review is able to establish that the testing was done in comportment with that?
Yeah, so as me, if I were doing a technical review, I would look over the entire case file. Did what the processing steps happen? Were they per protocol? Is it also something that I would have done in this case? If data is ultimately generated, I also do that comparison. Based on that comparison, what did I come to the conclusion to? Was that the same as the other analysts? Did we agree? Were stats done? Were they done the same way I would have done it? Essentially, all conclusions would have to be in alignment between both analysts.
And so when you're doing a technical review, you're looking at or doing your own sort of comparisons, coming to your own conclusions, and running your own statistics. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm doing the comparisons myself and seeing if I also agree and come to the same conclusions.
Now, as part of the accreditation process, do you undergo any sort of proficiency testing?
We do.
And can you explain to the jury that proficiency testing process at Bodie Technologies?
So an outside organization sends tests to our laboratory. Everyone participating in these proficiency testing completes their assignment. It gets submitted back to the organization, and they review the results to see if it matches up with the expected results on their end.
And how often do analysts at your lab undergo proficiency testing?
Twice a year.
Now, turning to you specifically, what areas do you specifically undergo proficiency testing in?
I do testing within short tandem repeats, STRs, YSTRs, mitochondrial DNA analysis.
And have you successfully completed each of those proficiency tests that you've taken?
I have.
Now, could you explain to the jury what are positive and negative controls, and sort of what is the difference between the two of those?
So throughout processing, we introduce controls such as a positive and negative control. Positive control is just a known template that we introduce during processing. It measures the efficacy of the testing and to see if we develop the known profile that we are expecting, just to make sure that testing went as it should have. Negative control, on the other hand, monitors for any type of contamination and cleanliness of reagents. And there's no DNA template introduced in this, so we don't expect data. So once that aligns with it, then we know that reagents used were good.
Now, sir, are you familiar with some mitochondrial DNA testing that was performed at Bodie on lab case number CCA 2416-0023 pertaining to this defendant, Karen Reed?
Yes.
And the lab received those items for testing from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, correct?
Correct.
And did you also, or do you also receive a corresponding agency case number from that arraigned submitting agency?
Yes.
And in this case was the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, lab number 22-02184.
Yes.
And what type of work did Bodie Labs do on CCA 2416-0023 with respect to mitochondrial DNA testing?
So we received 2 evidence items, a hair sample and a reference sample, and we were asked to type these for mitochondrial DNA.
Now, could you explain to the jury the process in general terms used to analyze that type of evidence?
So it's a similar process that you may have heard already for nuclear DNA or STRs. After DNA extraction, that's where we isolate and release DNA from the sample. It goes through amplification processing. This is where we employ the polymerase chain reaction or PCR technique. So we create numerous copies of targeted section within the DNA. This is just so we have enough DNA to generate a DNA profile. Following that, we do what's called quantification. So we determine a generated estimate of how much DNA is present within the sample. Following that, we do what's called sequencing. So we used a technique called Sanger sequencing. So bases within the sample, the order bases are determined, and bases are essentially building blocks of the DNA. So everyone has 4 bases in their DNA, and we refer to these bases to the letters A, G, T, and C. After sequencing, we go through what's called capillary electrophoresis, and so these bases are sequenced individually, and the data is interpreted.
Now, was there a known standard done in this case?
Yes.
And did another analyst test and report the results from the known blood standard from Mr. John O'Keefe?
What was that? Sorry.
Sure. Did another analyst test and report the results from the known blood standard from a Mr. John O'Keefe?
Yes.
And again, with reference to mitochondrial DNA testing, what items did the Bodie lab test for?
A hair shaft sample and the known DNA standard.
Now, can you please describe to the jury, again in general terms, the process of comparison between a known standard and an evidence sample?
So we generate data from typically the evidence sample first, and then just to see that we get comparable data, and then we process the known reference standard. Then we look at the 2 DNA profiles of these different samples and we compare them. Based on the data, are we seeing that we can or cannot exclude the reference donor as being a source of the evidence sample?
What is autosomal DNA?
Autosomal DNA is like nuclear DNA. It's something that you maybe more, when thought of forensics, traditional STR short tandem repeats.
And what is mitochondrial DNA?
Mitochondrial DNA is a different type of DNA from nuclear DNA. Nuclear DNA, you get half of your DNA from your parents, so mom and dad, whereas mitochondrial DNA, it gets entirely inherited from mother to child.
What is the difference between the two as far as where it's located in reference to the nucleus of a cell?
So with STRs, there's basically 2 copies per cell, whereas with mitochondrial DNA, there's several copies per cell. So there's more abundance in mitochondrial DNA.
Now, how does that apply to an extract from a hair sample?
So for hair samples, we typically categorize these with like hairs with roots and rootless hair samples. So with hair samples, typically in the shaft end, there's more abundance of the mitochondrial DNA versus nuclear DNA, where nuclear DNA tends to be degraded or not present in high enough amounts.
What does PCR stand for?
PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction.
And can you please describe the PCR method to the jury?
Yes, so that's the process where we create specific targeted sections of the DNA over and over. So we're replicating DNA using the source material as a template. This is because we want enough copies of that DNA to generate the end result of a DNA profile. So it would be similar to, say, like a copy machine. You start with a single piece of paper, and you make many, many copies from that piece of paper.
Now, sir, you alluded to it, I believe, earlier in your testimony, but just specifically as to this topic, what is DNA sequencing?
DNA sequencing is where we determine the order of bases within that sample.
And how is DNA sequencing used specifically in mitochondrial DNA testing?
So we use that to generate the sequence specific to that sample, so that when we get the end result data, we compare it to a known standard or a common reference standard, and any differences from that common standard gets reported as that individual's mitochondrial profile.
Now, how is the testing different between autosomal versus mitochondrial DNA testing?
A lot of it does have some similarities, but the difference comes with STRs being more of a length fragment testing, and mitochondrial DNA is more of a base nucleotide DNA testing.
Now, as far as the running of the DNA, how is that sort of physically done, or what kind of tools are you using specific to mitochondrial DNA testing?
Yeah, so we use different instrumentation, such as like a thermocycler to do the PCR step, and then we also use what's called like a genetic analyzer at the end step of capillary electrophoresis.
Is there a certain type of gel that's used as far as visualization of that profile?
Yeah, so during the quantification step, we use what's called a yield gel, and we get a visual presentation of how much DNA is present within that sample.
When you say a visual presentation, visual, like what type of instruments are you using to get that visualization?
So we use a gel and a UV light and a camera to capture essentially what we refer to as a band.
And what does that band look like?
It's generally, if there is presence of mitochondrial DNA within that sample, it emits a bright band on this gel. If there isn't anything, then we don't observe that band.
And what kind of instrumentation does your lab utilize in mitochondrial DNA testing?
We use a thermocycler or 3130 genetic analyzer as well.
Could you spell that, please?
The thermocycler, or THERMALCYCLER.
And then what were the digits after it?
And then the genetic analyzer is a 3130 3130.
And if you could you please describe what those instruments do, or what they're used for specifically within the process of the mitochondrial DNA testing?
Yeah, so instruments is common within laboratories for automation purposes, so that thermocycler helps with the PCR stages, and then the genetic analyzer helps with the separation of the individual bases and then generating that end result data where the analyst will interpret the data.
What is a D loop?
The D loop is the control region.
And how does that D loop factor into this type of analysis?
So with mitochondrial DNA analysis, we analyze certain regions within the D loop or the control region, and we refer to these as hypervariable regions, so HV1 and HV2.
And what does the D loop have to do with certain variabilities within the human population?
So this region is a non-coding region within the mitochondria, so it can allow for mutations because it wouldn't affect the mitochondria functions. Because of this highly variable difference within this region, it's useful for determining different maternal populations.
Now, did the Bodie lab also perform mitochondrial DNA testing on the known standard from John O'Keefe?
Yes.
And is that mitochondrial DNA testing the same for the known standard of John O'Keefe as it is, as you've been describing, with reference to the evidence sample?
Yes.
And what is then done generally in the comparison of those two profiles?
So once we develop the profiles from these two separate sources, a comparison is done to each other, and we look at it to see if the profiles consistent, essentially matching with each other, and seeing if an exclusion or inclusion can be made.
And did you then perform your own comparative analysis of those two mitochondrial DNA profiles from the hair extracts from the rear panel of the defendant's vehicle and that of the known standard of Mr. O'Keefe?
I did.
And what is your opinion or conclusions that you arrived at from that comparative analysis?
Sustained.
Hold
on. Ask it differently, Mr. Miller.
What conclusions did you come to from that comparative analysis between those two standards?
That John O'Keefe could not be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
Now, can you expound a little as far as your conclusion is concerned? What does that mean?
Yeah, if I may refer to my report.
Yes.
So whenever we have a conclusion of a probable inclusion, like in this case where I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a source of the hair sample, we do a statistical analysis to give weight to that probable inclusion. So in this case, using a database and with 95% can be excluded.
Is referred to as MPOP, EMP, is that correct?
Correct.
And what's an MPOP?
So it's a searchable database where we search profiles in the database and to see how percentage can be excluded as being a source of that hair sample.
Okay, and let me ask you just in general terms, that database used is referred to as MPOP, EMP, is that correct?
Correct.
And what's an MPOP?
So it's a searchable database where we search.
Did you come to reference to the sample versus Mr. O'Keefe's sample in the MPOP database?
95% confidence that 95% of the population can be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
Now, you made reference in your testimony a moment before about a confidence interval. What is that?
Yeah, so whenever we obtain statistical data, we use a confidence interval or upper limit frequency. This is just like a range where the true value of said profile is, but we generally want to report like a conservative end to avoid any false inclusions. So it's at least 99.895% that the majority of the population can be excluded, but it could be higher, but at the lower end, it would be at least 99.895%.
And what confidence interval in your conclusion does this consistency between the hair sample profile from the rear quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle have to Mr. O'Keefe's mitochondrial DNA profile?
So it's the 95% confidence, 99.985% of the population. So the majority of the population could be excluded. However, with John O'Keefe and his maternal relatives, they could not.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further on.
Okay. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Miyasaka.
Good morning.
Couple of quick questions. Mitochondrial DNA, as you've explained, is different than autosomal DNA in pretty significant ways, correct?
Correct.
What we think of as traditional nuclear DNA, that's autosomal DNA. That's the DNA that we derive from mom and dad, comes down to the child, correct?
Correct.
Mitochondrial DNA, by contrast, is simply the maternal line, excluding the dads, correct?
Correct.
So, my mitochondrial DNA has nothing to do with my father, everything to do with my mother. Is that right?
Yeah, mitochondrial DNA gets inherited from the mom to child.
Okay, so a male like John O'Keefe, for instance, the known sample that you were working with, shares the exact same mitochondrial DNA as, for instance, his mother. Correct?
Correct. His mom and any other maternally related individuals.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, and that's my next question. Stop being smarter than me. It's going to be a tough task. It's also the exact same mitochondrial DNA for his grandmother, right?
Correct.
And let's move the lineage off the tree trunk and move it onto branches. For instance, if his mother had 2 children, John and a sister, his sister would also have the exact same mitochondrial DNA, correct?
Correct.
And now, staying on that branch of the tree, going out to a leaf, if his sister had children, those children would have the exact same mitochondrial DNA.
Correct.
So another way of saying that, his maternal niece, his maternal nephew, would have the identical mitochondrial DNA as John O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you indicated that John O'Keefe is included in the population of those who match that profile, that does not mean that you're determining that the hair that you analyzed came from John O'Keefe, does it?
No, with mitochondrial DNA analysis, it's not unique to individual. Compared to traditional STRs or short-chain repeat, that could be unique to individual, but with mitochondrial DNA, it's not unique to individual, but more so a maternal lineage.
All right, so, Mr. Miyasako, very importantly, you're not sitting here saying that that hair belonged to John O'Keefe.
I'm saying that the hair sample on John O'Keefe cannot be excluded, as well as his maternal relatives.
So we're speaking in negatives. I want to speak in a positive. You are not saying that John O'Keefe, that hair belonged to John O'Keefe, are you? Yes or no?
Sustained.
Are you suggesting to these jurors that the hair that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
Yes.
Sustained.
Are you telling the jurors, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that the hair that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
Yes.
I'll see you at sidebar.
Sure.
All right, it looks like they are taking a little bit of a sidebar there in Massachusetts for the Karen Reed retrial entering week 5. In the meantime, top right-hand side of your screen is a hearing that is happening right now out of Ohio. And this looks like it is the hearing for Kyle Snyder, the Olympic medalist charged in a prostitution sting. He's expected to plead guilty to misdemeanor charges. Let's listen in here live on Live Impact News on WCNC+.
Yes. What is your plea to the amended charge of disorderly conduct?
I plead guilty.
All right. The court will accept your guilty plea to the amended charge. Mr. Hoffman.
Your Honor, Mr. Snyder is here today to accept responsibility for his actions. He's been cooperative from the beginning. He has no prior criminal record. He's shown sincere remorse for his conduct. This was a lapse of judgment, one that he takes seriously and from which he's committed to learning. As a world champion athlete and public figure, Mr. Snyder understands that his actions carry weight. He is deeply aware of the impact this has had on those who look up to him, and he regrets the embarrassment caused to his family, his community, and the public. He has handled this matter with honesty and integrity. We believe this incident does not define who he is. Given his cooperation and clean record, we respectfully ask the court to accept the joint recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Snyder, anything that you wish to add?
Thank you very much, and I've learned a lot through this process, and it's taught me a lot about myself, and I plan on making much better decisions. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I see that you did take the John School. Is there anything that you want to tell the court that you learned?
The John School was really good. It's a great course, and I learned about why I made the decision that I did, which was because I, had too much pride, and I learned about the impact that these decisions have on not just my family, but the community, and so it was a very impactful course.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you learned something, and that's why I asked the question, because we do provide that class, and I want you to learn from it. So, anyway, at this time, sir, the court is going to impose a fine of $250 plus court cost. How long does he need, counsel? What's that?
Paid today.
Can you pay that today? All right. Sir? Okay. To be paid forthwith. Also, the court's going to note that the STI and the John School has been completed. Sir, the funds that were seized will be forfeited, and the court's going to order that the record should not be sealed for 2 years from final disposition. All right. Anything else, Mr. Hoffman?
That's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Good luck to you, Mr. Snyder. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, you were just watching live now, a hearing underway with Olympic medalist Kyle Snyder, gold winning for wrestling. Kyle Snyder pleading guilty to a prostitution sting and now charged with a $250 charge after pleading guilty to a misdemeanor charge. Karen Reed, in Dedham, Massachusetts. That sidebar is over with a DNA analyst now on the stand. Let's listen in here live on Live Impact News on WCNC+.
In this instance, John O'Keefe's profile was consistent with the hair sample.
That's not what my question was, Mr. Miyasako. We can go round and round. I realize that you're saying it's consistent, but it's also consistent with his nephew, right?
Correct. I can't exclude maternal relatives because mitochondrial DNA is not specific to individual, but just the maternal line.
Right. So you're not saying it was John O'Keefe's hair?
I can't say whether it is, but the profile obtained from John O'Keefe is consistent with that hair sample.
You're not
But
saying it's John
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson, let's move on.
The reason you can't say that it's John O'Keefe's hair is because it also matches everybody in his maternal line. That's what we're getting down to, correct?
yeah, with mitochondrial DNA, again, it's not unique to an individual, but their maternal lineage.
And if his maternal nephew lived in the same residence and had access to the same SUV, couldn't exclude him either, right?
Sustained.
So in short, Mr. Miyasako, you cannot tell this jury when the hair got to where it was, correct?
Sustained.
You can't tell this jury how the hair got to where it was found, correct?
Sustained.
And you certainly cannot tell the jury that the hair belonged to John, right?
Sustained.
I think we've got it. Thanks, Your Honor.
Mr. Lally, anything?
So, Mr. Miyasako, including the MPOP, the statistics, and the confidence interval, what is your conclusion in reference to the comparative analysis from mitochondrial profiles from the hair sample from the rear quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle and the known standard of John O'Keefe?
Based on the genetic data obtained for the two different samples, I could not exclude John O'Keefe's known standards profile being consistent with the hair samples profile, and with 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as a source of the evidence.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
One final question, Your Honor. Do you also maintain that 95% confidence that could have his nephew?
Yeah, so again, with maternal
You can
populations.
finish your answer. Go.
With maternal populations, I can't exclude anybody maternally related to John O'Keefe as well.
Thank you very much, sir. You are all set. Where's the Commonwealth Day?
And you can see right now that that DNA analyst finished with his testimony, just turning this testimony to the scientific process right now, details of the machines used in the lab. We've seen several DNA experts take the stand here on the Karen Reed retrial as it enters its 5th week underway there just outside of Boston. If you are following the case, you know that Karen Reed is charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence, and leaving the scene after being accused of striking her boyfriend, a Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, with her SUV at a house party back in 2022, and then leaving him to die alone in the snow outside of the house of a fellow police officer. But her defense team says that she is the victim of vast police conspiracy, and that O'Keefe was fatally beaten by another officer. It looks like we have a new witness taking the testimony here, swearing in and sitting on the stand. Let's go back to the trial here live on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
The jurors spell your last name for the court reporter.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Shannon Burgess, last name Burgess.
Mr. Burgess, what do you do for a profession?
Sure. So I'm a digital forensics examiner. So I investigate digital devices to see what evidence they may record or hold.
Do you specialize in any type of forensic analysis?
Sure. So digital forensics is kind of a broad field, but I do specialize in vehicle forensics and cell phone forensics.
How long have you been a digital forensic analyst for?
Sure. So I've been a digital forensic analyst for approximately 10 years.
Before you were a digital forensic analyst, what type of work did you do?
Sure. So before I was a digital forensics analyst, I was working in the automotive manufacturing field, specifically related to automotive presses and industrial robotics.
I want to talk to you about some of your experience in digital forensic. Did you receive any certifications in digital forensics?
I did. I've received several certifications, one being what's called GIAC, Advanced Smartphone Forensics, another from Celebrite, a company named Celebrite, in Certified Mobile Examiner, and then certifications from Magnet Forensics as well.
Is Magnet a company that also includes Axiom?
Yes, Magnet is a company that produces the software known as Axiom.
In addition to your certifications, how many hours of specialized training approximately have you had in digital forensics?
Sure. So approximately, over the last 10 years, I've had around 700 hours of training, including courses and conference attendance in digital forensics.
In addition to your training and your study, do you have experience over the 10 years? Have you involved yourself in many cases regarding forensics found from a motor vehicle?
Yes, I have.
Can you give a general estimate of how many cases you've worked on?
Oh, not off the top of my head, I couldn't, but it's been numerous.
You said that you specialize in mobile phones and digital forensics in motor vehicles.
That is correct.
Do you teach seminars on those issues?
I do. I teach seminars and presentations specifically in those disciplines.
Who are some of the audiences that you teach to?
Sure. So it ranges from attorneys to engineers that specialize in accident reconstruction to police agencies such as Interpol, which is a global police organization.
Have you testified as an expert in digital forensics in court before?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever testified as an expert regarding digital forensics in state courts?
Yes, I have.
And could you share with us those state courts?
Sure. So those state courts would be Oregon, Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, and those would be the ones in the last 4 years that I can recall off the top of my head.
Have you testified as an expert in digital forensics in federal courts before?
No, just in state courts.
Have you testified in state courts in civil cases?
Yes, I have.
Have you testified for plaintiffs in civil cases?
I have testified for plaintiffs and defense in civil cases.
And have you testified in criminal cases before?
I have testified in criminal cases as well.
Have you testified for the prosecution before?
I have. I have testified for the prosecution as well as the defense.
Does the data change regardless of who you testify for?
No, it does not.
Where are you presently employed, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So I'm presently employed with a company known as Aperture, and I'm located in their Dallas office.
Is Aperture a company that has offices outside of Texas?
Sure. So Aperture is a company across the country. So they've got a number of locations and offices, and they offer a number of service lines specifically related to forensics.
Do you ever work on different cases or scenarios with people in the Texas office?
Yes, I do. Sure. Go ahead.
Do you ever work with other employees of Aperture outside of the Texas office?
Yes. So I do occasionally corroborate with other experts in the Texas offices as well as the other offices across the country.
In this case, was there another professional who worked with Aperture that was related to this case that you talked to?
There was.
And who was that?
That would be Dr. Judson Welcher.
Is Dr. Welcher's profession and job the same as yours?
No, it is not.
What's the difference between what you do and what Dr. Judd Welcher does?
Sure. So what I do is investigate digital devices that can range from cell phones to vehicle modules to computer systems. What Dr. Welcher does is specifically related to accident reconstruction and biomechanics.
So you are not an accident reconstruction engineer?
I am not.
You are focused on the data?
I am focused on the data.
Did you ever publish any writings or papers regarding the area of your expertise?
Sure. So I have published 2 papers, specifically one related to damaged devices, and that is referencing event data recorders, which is your black box or your airbag control module, and specifically related to developing proof of concepts, because a lot of times these modules will store data in different places on the module. Proof of concepts are ways to verify and validate where that data is stored, so you're not missing data.
So that first article that you wrote about damaged modules, was that peer reviewed?
It was.
And was it accepted?
It was accepted.
Could you tell us briefly what peer-reviewed means?
Sure. So peer review is a process of your peers or colleagues reviewing your work and determining that it's valid.
Is peer-reviewed articles often relied upon by other experts in the field?
Yes, they are.
You said that the first article you mentioned had to do with damaged modules. Is that one of the areas specifically that you're going to talk to us about in this case?
Sure. So it is specifically one of the areas I'm going to talk about in this case. And to kind of go back a little bit, the idea of proof of concept applies not only to damaged modules, but also, other vehicle modules, such as infotainment and telematics modules.
I don't think we're at infotainment and telematics yet, so if we can just understand a little better, very basically, what is proof of concept in action? What does that mean?
Sure. So proof of concept is taking a vehicle module, for example. This is typically an unidentified vehicle module that other individuals have not looked at or verified what is recorded and where it is stored. So a proof of concept is taking exemplar modules and doing tests on those modules. So creating events that are recorded within the modules. A lot of times when those modules are damaged in vehicle crashes or if they're just unsupported by your forensic tools, you will have to go to what's called chip off or chip swap forensics. That is specifically taking the chips off of the circuit board. So think of the hard drives from your computer, moving those hard drives to another module, a working module, to recover the data and validating that you've recovered all the data that you would expect to see.
Are there times in cases or studies where you need to recover data because it's not available to you through the traditional methods?
Yes, many times.
Let me ask you, you said there was a second article. What was that second peer review article about?
Sure. So that second peer-reviewed article was specifically related to mobile forensics, specifically iPhones, and how they track your device interactions as well as speed and location data and validating how accurate that data was.
In addition to talking to us about damaged modules, as you're going to do in this case, are you also going to talk to us about the timing information from mobile phones?
Yes, I am.
When did you first become involved in the study of this case?
So I first became involved in this case around October of 2024.
When you became involved in October of 2024, were you in receipt of any information or reports or documents to look at?
Yes. So I did receive some raw data as well as some photographs from the vehicle in this case.
When you say raw data from the vehicle, what does that mean specifically?
Sure. So again, when you take these chips or hard drives off of these modules, you can read those chips individually and recover any type of data that is recorded on those chips. So when I reference raw data, that is looking at that data in hexadecimal format, which is as close to binary data, which is what computers use to store data in, as you would want to get when reviewing this type of data.
When you receive data, does that presume it's already been downloaded by somebody?
Yes, that is correct.
In addition to looking at the data, you receive photographs. Do you know where those photographs came from?
I do not know specifically who those photographs came from, but I do know those photographs came from an initial download attempt on those modules.
You said there was an initial download attempt. When you looked at the information you received, did you learn whether or not there was an attempt prior to your involvement in October 2024 to obtain data from the modules or the so-called black box in the Lexus vehicle?
Yes, so there was an attempt to download data from the modules in the vehicle.
Did you understand whether or not there was a chip-off process, whether anybody attempted to take the computer chips off the computer boards and learn or download the data?
Yes, there was an attempt to remove various chips off of the boards and read those chips individually.
Did you have an opportunity to read any reports submitted regarding that earlier process that occurred before you even got involved?
Not before I got involved. Well, sorry. Yes, I was able to read a report from an individual known as AG Speak about that process, that initial process.
Did you learn who conducted, the name of the person that actually conducted the original process before you were involved in this case?
Yes, I understand that person to be Miss Maggie Gaffney.
Do you know generally when Miss Gaffney engaged in trying to download information from the computer boards of the defendant's car?
Yeah, if I can recall correctly, that was around December of 2023.
And in your review of materials and study materials, did you receive additional materials?
Yes, I did receive additional crash reports, just detailing the events of the night.
When you say crash reports, what does that mean?
So that's going to be crash reports from the Massachusetts State Police.
Is a crash report just a written report, or is it data?
No, it's just a report, no data.
Did you receive any other reports from any other individuals or experts?
No, not at that time.
Did you later, over time, receive any more additional information during your studies?
Yes, I believe so. And let me reference my report just so I don't misspeak.
Let me ask for the court's permission before you do that.
Sure, sorry.
Yes.
So I did, again, I reviewed a vehicle forensics report by AG Speak. I reviewed documentation that was identified to me as evidence review. A prior testimony of Trooper Garino. And I reviewed some surveillance videos as well as a report by Mr. Whiffen.
When did you receive any study or reports from Mr. Garino? Do you remember?
I do not remember exactly.
Okay. Was it recently, some time ago?
It would have been some time ago, probably late 2024 after we got involved.
Last year?
Yes.
And how about Mr. Whiffen's reports?
Mr. Whiffen's report, I believe I received in January of this year.
In the video, do you know when you received any video?
It would have been this year. I don't remember the exact dates.
Was it last month, months ago?
No, probably around January or February as well. Well, I take that back. It would have been early January, maybe late December.
Okay. I want to ask you just generally so we have a general perspective on this. When you began your study, was there something specifically that you were looking for?
There was. So specifically what we're looking for when we do a chip-off on these vehicle modules, we're expecting to see one of two things. User data in a raw hexadecimal format or a file system where user data is stored.
Were there certain events that you were focused on relative to the data in the defendant's Lexus?
Sure. So there were specific events that we were looking for specifically. That would be including time-stamped ignition-on events or power-on events, as well as other data.
Did you have any information or understanding that there were text stream events that you were to focus on?
Yes, I did have an understanding that there were text stream events located in a airbag control module.
How many text stream events were you focused on?
2 text stream events.
Could you just generally characterize those 2 events?
Sure. So one event has been identified as a 3-point turn maneuver, and the other has been identified as a backing maneuver.
Now, the studies of those events, is that the role of the accident reconstructionist?
Yes, it is.
So then what was your role related to, your specific role related to those 2 characterized events, the 3-point turn event and the backing maneuver event?
Sure. So within that text stream data, those events are documented with what's called a time count. So that's going to be a running timer from the time the vehicle powers on or the ignition comes on. So that counter will count seconds incrementally. And specifically, the focus was looking for any time-stamped data that would offer when that power-on event occurred.
Did you put together a PowerPoint presentation regarding your assessment of some of this case?
Yes, I did.
May I approach?
Yes.
handing you a package. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That is my PowerPoint presentation that I prepared.
Just turn a few pages so
Sure.
you can look and see if that accurately reflects the presentation you put together.
Yes, it appears so.
And does this reflect some of your study of this case?
It does reflect some of the study in this case.
Is it an entire comprehensive study of everything that you learned, or is it an overview?
No, it is an overview.
For the course permission, I would mark this for identification. I intend to use this, the course permission, as a chalk.
Okay, so we'll mark it for identification.
Exhibit SS for identification.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sir, I want you to teach us a little bit about the computers in a motor vehicle. Is there one computer, like a black box in an airplane?
No, so there's actually many. Depending on the vehicle, there could be hundreds with very specific functions to what they're what they're meant to do.
Tell us a little bit about why there's a need, or why many computers are used in a single vehicle.
Sure. So there's so many functions within your modern vehicle nowadays. So for instance, your infotainment module, that is a computer that operates your radio, your head unit. So that's going to be your obviously your radio, any type of built-in navigations, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. There's what's called a telematics module. That's going to be what actually allows the vehicle to communicate with the internet services. So when you look at, if you've got an app that can track your vehicle or unlock your doors, that's being allowed through that telematics module.
With the court's permission, I'd like to have Ms. Gilman show page 3 of the PowerPoint.
Any objection, Mr. Leslie?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Sir, on your PowerPoint page 3, you have a chalk or diagram of a car. You may have a pointer in front of you if it helps.
Sure.
If you could direct your attention to the TV to your right. Could you explain to us what this diagram shows us?
Sure. So this is a diagram that just shows, a small number of modules that you can find in specifically the Lexus in this case. Again, what we're focused on and looking at is the infotainment module and the telematics module in orange. For example, there are other modules known as the body control module and the airbag control module, the engine control module, which runs your vehicle. In addition to that, there are other modules that operate your door locks and unlocks, your windows, and various other functions.
When you use the word module, is that the same thing as a separate computer, or is it different somehow?
Yeah, so that using parlance, module would be referring to a separate computer within the vehicle.
Do all of these separate computers in the vehicle connect with each other?
They do. So all of these modules are connected to one another, and they do communicate with each other.
The information that would be commonly referred to as black box, or information that captures some of an event, where would that be in this diagram?
Sure. So the black box would be in the airbag control module.
And then as far as the radio system, you shared with us that's the infotainment module?
Yes. So the radio system is going to be, that data is going to be stored within the infotainment module.
In the telematics module, specifically what are we looking for there?
Sure. So the telematics module, again, is a module that allows communication with internet services. So if you've got an app on your phone that you can unlock or lock your doors, that's the telematics module is allowing that function to occur.
Do all make and model cars have the same setup as this diagram?
No, they do not. It will vary.
Does it vary from car maker to car maker?
It does. It varies from car maker to car maker. It varies from trim level as well.
Could two different cars from the same manufacturer, same style, could they have different components in those cars?
They could, yes.
Why is that?
Sure. So during the manufacturing phase, depending on cost and other things, manufacturers will source these modules from different third-party manufacturers. So one vehicle may have a module from, for instance, LG Electronics. One may have a module from Denso. And depending on how those individual manufacturers implement that software and hardware, they may record and store different types of data.
So from your experience, you've reviewed or you studied a 2022 Lexus, and then you see another Lexus, whether it's 2022, 2023. Would you be able to say you've seen it, you've already done it, or do you have to individually look at each car?
Sure. So you would typically look at, and to correct, it's a 2021 Lexus. But if you want to understand what may be stored in a subject module, you would look at take an exemplar vehicle and conduct some testing to determine what is being recorded and how that data is being recorded.
You mentioned that you were looking for time information or power on information regarding 2 events.
Correct.
Can we characterize those events as tech stream events?
Yes, we can.
Do people sometimes refer to them as triggering events?
Objection, Your Honor. Sustained.
Are they often or sometimes referred to as something else other than a tech stream event?
They can be referred to as other things besides tech stream events.
Can you give us an example of what else they may be referred to as?
Sure. So that would be triggering events.
Why is it called a triggering event?
Sure. So the event is actually created when there's a trigger, and those trigger thresholds will vary and could be for a number of different reasons.
When a tech stream event happens, or a so-called triggering event, what happens in the data?
Sure. So when a tech stream event happens, there is when that trigger is met, there is certain data parameters or data types that are recorded for a specific time frame.
In this case, how many of those events were you looking at?
Just one.
When you mentioned time, I want to have you explain to us a little bit about time. You said there's a running clock. Can you explain that in a little more detail and simply what that means?
Sure. So in what's recorded within the tech stream events, I'll refer to as a running clock. Essentially what it is when the vehicle is powered on, this clock starts to run and it counts seconds from power on. So when you press the ignition on, this clock starts, and when there is a tech stream event that occurs within that cycle or within that ignition on, that is recorded as the time that trigger occurred.
Does that give an actual time, like when you look at your watch or you look at your cell phone?
It does not give an actual time, yeah.
Excuse me, Your Honor, pardon the interruption. The chalk remains on the screen.
Okay, are you still reviewing the chalk?
We can take it down if it pleases Attorney Alisi.
Thank you.
So you were getting back to the clock. You said it's like a running clock. Is that like a stopwatch?
Yeah, that could be referred to as a stopwatch.
Where is that running clock kept in the data?
Sure. So that running clock is kept within the airbag control module.
Is that the so-called black box part of the data?
That is correct.
With the running clock, how do you determine the actual time as it relates to, say, for example, your digital watch or your iPhone or another clock?
Sure. So in that instance, you would need to have an event that occurs, such as a power on event, with a timestamp to reference back that running clock.
When you got involved in this case and you looked at the information that was previously downloaded by Ms. Gaffney, was there any data regarding power on, power off to mark that time?
From the initial download, there was not.
When you involved yourself in your study, what was your primary focus as far as information you wanted to get and why?
Sure. So primary focus when I initially got brought on was to look at the modules and see if there was any data that was not recovered. And then specifically, again, looking at any time-stamped data that may have been recorded within the modules.
You talked about the differences in modules. In your PowerPoint, did you provide a couple of photographs of the modules so we can see what you were talking about?
Yes, I did.
With the court's permission, I'd like to put on page 4 of the PowerPoint.
Okay.
No objection, Your Honor.
Yep.
Could you explain to us the photograph on the left and then the photograph on the right?
Sure. So the photograph on the left is kind of a top-down view of the infotainment module from the Lexus. Photograph on the right is a top-down view of the telematics module from the Lexus.
Are these modules from this specific car, or is this a general photograph of a car and how it works?
These modules are from this specific vehicle.
From the car you studied?
Correct.
On the left infotainment module, you have different manufacturers. Why is that?
Sure. So again, these modules are not manufactured by Lexus or Toyota themselves. They are manufactured by third parties that are providing these modules to the car manufacturer. And these are just some examples of what we have seen within these specific vehicles and what type of manufacturers provide modules for these vehicles.
If we could turn to page 5, please. When you looked at the data that was provided in this case, did you draft a report?
Yes, I did.
Your initial impressions, can you share with us what your initial impressions were?
Sure. So initial impressions were that data was missed from the initial download.
What type of data do you think was missed, or did you conclude was missed from the initial download?
Sure. So that would be, essentially all of the user data was missed during that initial download.
How did you conclude or come to the opinion that data was missed on the initial download?
Sure. So reviewing the raw data, you can see that what we would expect to find, which would be things like contacts or from devices or device connections or time-stamped data, was not there in those initial downloads.
When you first looked at the data and you came to the conclusion that there was missing data, did you have a working theory on what you thought or how you thought the information was missing?
Sure. So I did have a working theory initially of why the data was missing.
And what was your initial theory?
Sure. So if, I'll reference kind of to the slide a little bit.
We can take that down if you'd like, Mr. Lisi.
Sure. So, sorry, can you repeat the question?
When you had your initial theory of data missing, what was it based on?
Sure. So the initial theory was based on two things. Either one of two things initially I thought could have happened, and that was a bad or partial read of the chips, or it could be that the data-bearing chip that we are looking for was overlooked and not downloaded.
When your first thoughts were that this was a partial read of chips, was there anything about the chips when you looked at them that you concluded or came to an opinion on?
Sure. So initially, when I was reviewing the data and reviewing the part numbers on the chips, we can see what, how much storage is on each chip. And that can kind of get complicated, but essentially what we're looking at is data stored as either bits or bytes. That is represented as a capital B or a small lowercase b. So initially, upon reviewing the data and with the assumption that a competent examiner would not miss a chip or a device or data-bearing chip on the board, I misinterpreted and wrote a lowercase or a capital B when I should have wrote a lowercase b in my notes, which led me to believe that there was a partial download of those initial chips.
Now, as a forensic analyst, do you rest on your initial impressions or do you go through a continued process?
No, so I do not. So just like the scientific method, if you have a working theory, you then review and research to either prove or disprove that theory.
And did you engage in that scientific process in working theory?
I did.
And how soon after you wrote the report did you realize there may be another source of the material?
Sure. So, I'll clarify a little bit. That initial was not a report; it was just a protocol that was proposed. But I believe that there was a supplemental protocol written within a week or two of the initial protocol.
And when you used the scientific method and studied the theory that you had, what did you decide or what did you learn?
Sure. So upon further review and research, I discovered that there was a SD card or a micro SD card that was on the circuit boards of one of the modules that was never looked at.
Now, you weren't present at the original process?
That is correct.
When you looked at the modules, those computer boards, did you notice anything about them that happened during the original process?
Sure. So I did notice during the chip-off process, what you do to take these chips off is you apply heat to them. So that essentially liquefies the solder, which is a low-temperature metal that connects the chips to the board and makes those connections so the board can communicate. And there was some damage caused from that initial chip-off.
And again, why would you take the chips off a board if they're already attached? Why would you need to do that?
Sure. So when you don't have, typically if you think about downloading data from your cell phone, you have a USB port on your cell phone that you can easily plug that into a computer. That's not the case with vehicle modules. So you have to remove these chips from the board, and then you've got programmers or readers that will read the data from these chips.
Did you have a chance to study the boards that were already accessed during an earlier chip-off process before you got involved?
Yes, I did have an opportunity to study some photographs of the boards.
Could we have page 14, please, Ms. Gilman?
Any objection, Mr. Lewis?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, if we could turn to page 15. Tell us what this is, please.
Sure. So this is the infotainment module that you saw earlier. This is just two photographs during the disassembly process of taking that module apart.
Could you zoom in on the right photograph, Ms. Gilman? Okay, if that's the best we can do, that's fine right there. Could you share with us a little bit about what this is?
Sure. So this is how I received the modules when we took a secondary look at them. Essentially, this is if you see from the right photographs, there's many boards that are contained within this infotainment module. This specific board that we're looking at here on the right is the board where they removed chips from. What we're looking at is the circuit board itself, as well as two components that were previously removed during that initial download attempt.
So if you can't read the chips on the board, if you remove them, is there a tool that you can use to actually read the individual chips in isolation?
Yes, so there is tools, various tools that you can use to read those chips and read the data from those chips.
If we could have 16, please. Can you tell us what you see here?
Sure. So what you see here is two of the components that were initially removed from the board during that first download attempt. I've documented an additional chip that was still on the board that was not identified during that initial download on this side of the circuit board. And then I've got photographs matching the chip and where its placement was initially on the circuit board.
Could we have page 17, please? And what do we see there?
Sure. So this is some of the damage that occurred to the circuit board itself during the initial chip-off download attempt.
Do you have a pointer on the stand?
I do, yes.
Could you show us with the left photograph, point out what you mean by damage?
Sure. So right here on the left part, you've got these two highlighted blocks. So what this is if you remember back to the last slide, the larger chip that we were looking at.
All right. Well, it looks like the audio has left the building there out of the courtroom in Dedham, Massachusetts for week 5 as another forensic expert is taking the witness stand in the Karen Reed retrial. Do want to get you caught up now with some breaking news. This is a picture that a viewer sent us of a fire in the Harrisburg area. You can see all of that black smoke. It looks like it's near the cross streets of Clear Creek and Loveland, and Loveland, I'm not quite sure, but in the Harrisburg area. This reported to us from a viewer, and the picture sent to us from Vishnu Reddy. Thank you, Vishnu, for sending us this picture. But we do see a plume of smoke from one of our distant cameras there into the sky. You can see that it is heavily damaged, and that will definitely affect things in the area. So something that we are looking into as crews are on their way to that scene in Harrisburg, and it appears that this building could be under construction as well. You can see the wooden boards there on the side of that structure. So we're working to learn more about what kind of structure this is. But this is in an area where there are new homes in the area as well. So again, we are waiting to get more information on this, but you can see what kind of structure fire we're dealing with all of this smoke and very dark and black. So that means a very intense, a very strong fire in the Harrisburg area. As we learn more, we're going to bring that to you here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Also want to get you caught up right now on a fire that burned 2 years ago out of South Park. This is the anniversary. Yesterday marks 2 years since a fire hit this construction site off Fairview. If you were in the area, you remember this. You could see smoke for hours and for miles as the heat and equipment led to a very destructive and deadly fire, might I say, killing 2 construction workers, DeMonte Sherrill and Reuben Holmes. Fire investigators say the cause was accidental, but the families of the victims have since filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the companies involved in this project. And a lot came out of this too, as our own Nate Morabito was looking into the permits that were going into working on this construction site, including where to place fire hydrants, because sourcing water was also a challenge for the area as well. So this was a big deal 2 years ago. I remember covering this fire too from the scene, and it was just a horrible, tragic mess. So some fire working through our Charlotte areas right now. They have since built or started construction on another building. The developer working on this, and it looks like they are still under construction. I was just trying to find the information on here. But the developer, Mill Creek Residential, began demolishing that charred structure and then still building the safety improvements in, the same community plans. And it looks like that new construction is expected to have tenants move in next month.
Jane, we have some breaking new video in.
Okay.
I apologize that it's sideways.
Okay.
This is
Thanks,
about
Carlene.
the fire from Harrisburg. This is new video we just got.
Wow. Okay, so we will work to get that strained away, but wow, those flames are intense. When you see all that black smoke, you know that a number of fire engines are going to go to that scene immediately, but very heavy fire, and it looks like it's under or behind or maybe involving the back of that current structure that is taking place right now in Harrisburg. Let's try to get you some more information here as well as we take a look right now. The original message coming to our newsroom just about 15 minutes ago, and saying that looks like that there was a structure fire, maybe a new building under construction in the Farmington community. We are reaching out to Harrisburg fire crews. Could be Farmington Ridge Parkway is what we are learning. But you can see, and again, the video coming to us here sideways, we're just bringing it to you so you can see as we're about to hand the stream off to Charlotte today. But this is behind townhomes or apartment buildings. Okay, thank you so much, Carlene. All right, so do we know what this building is?
As of now, nothing's confirmed.
Okay. But in the foreground here, we can see there's a parking lot. It looks like they're fairly new. They look very nice. Apartment buildings there, 3-story building, and that fire is right behind it or right next to it on that back corner.